All right, welcome to the Postgrad Perfect Pitch. My name is Martin McGovern, and just to give you a little bit of a background on me, I started my career out in the marketing world, and I helped companies use behavioral psychology and use all sorts of fun marketing tactics to get people to behave in different ways, namely to spend money on their products and services and things like that. And over the years, I've moved from marketing into advertising into education. And now I do career coaching, where I basically just reverse engineer all those same tactics to help you get money back from companies. So it's a lot of fun. Basically, what we're going to talk about today is communication, persuasion, a bunch of different things around that, and help you sell yourself better after this boot camp so that companies can feel confident in bringing you on. And so you can feel confident going into interviews and networking and different things like that. Before we start, I'd love to get to know everyone in the room. So we'll just do a quick roundabout. If you could just say your first name and one thing that is on your mind about the job search, positive, negative, or stressing you out. Matt, if you can kick us off.
Sure. So I'm Matt. I think one thing that's on my mind, well, it's kind of two things. Well, one, I'm happy that we have like these projects, especially like our capstone, to like talk about, because I know that that's going to be really good to like show that we like kind of know day to day of what this job will be and that we understand and we're like eager to keep learning with regards to that. One thing that I'm nervous about though is like in the interviews and the technical interviews, like those problems and being able to like confidently do those problems with like data structures and algorithms, because we didn't really cover that a lot, but I know that that'll come up in these types of interviews.
Absolutely. Appreciate you sharing that. Jennifer?
Well, Jennifer, and actually the whole process of getting a job worries me. From the first interview to the possible technical questions that I have to answer and have to show that I actually know how to do things, to, I don't know, just the whole thing. And what if they're like no, context back for the interviews that I thought I did well, and it's a lot.
Oh yeah, start to finish, the whole thing can be quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, especially when it comes to, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is more behavioral interview kind of stuff, how to talk about yourself, how to tell your stories, but that plays into the technical as well. Typically, what I hear from people who go through technical interviews when they don't go well, it's because we didn't provide enough context and we just sort of jumped into things or started explaining a technical thing or went on a rant or a ramble versus really setting up what we're doing, why we're doing it, and sort of walking people through it as though they don't know what we're saying, because a lot of times they don't, especially if they're not technical people themselves. So we'll touch on some of that as well. Ryan.
Sorry, there we go. My name is Ryan. I think the biggest thing for me is just kind of comparing myself to the job application, kind of like reading through it and then just like, do I know that? Or like, I feel like looking at it, thinking about if I get called on this, like, am I gonna know the answer, or will I, can I perform well enough to convince them that I know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big one. I was talking with someone the other day and they were saying, they're really nervous about not being seen as an expert. And I'm like, but you're not an expert. And, it's a pretty tall order to try and convince someone of something that you don't believe yourself. So typically it's better to be the most helpful person in the room than the smartest. A lot of times the smartest person in the room annoys everyone, while the most helpful person in the room actually gets things done. So we can definitely touch on some of that as well. Ben.
I think for me, it's just like making sure that to not rush this process and finding like a place that I can call home for a little while. Being like almost 3 years out of college now, I feel like I haven't found that role yet where I've like wanted to stay in it for more than the time that I had to, but also being like 9 months unemployed, I feel like I need to just get a job as soon as possible. And so trying to find the balance between that and somewhere where I can most benefit from is probably what I'm most concerned about right now.
That's great. Yeah, we can definitely talk to that. I think there's there's a push that we feel to just go after everything. And I think there's some value in that, especially if we want to just get some reps under our belt. But what I tend to see is when we go after everything, we tend to not get anything because we're just jumping all over the board, right? And when someone says, "Hey, how can I help you with your job search?" we're like, "I just need anything." And that typically makes it hard for someone to help us. So the more specific we can be, sometimes can be incredibly helpful. But it also comes with the opposite fear of pigeonholing ourselves. So we'll hopefully touch on that a little bit today. Dan, how about yourself?
For me, I think a little bit similar to Ben's last point, but also more towards the fact that I'm more concerned about not being seen or applying on time or applying the wrong times, because I know that and missing out on really good career or job opportunities that are posted. Um, like I've had that happen to me once before where I was very close to this job I really wanted to get, but then they found someone else that was like more senior than me and hired them instead. So kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the most common thing that we're going to hear in the job search is we went with someone with more experience. And just to kind of put it out there, that's the "it's not you, it's me" of job searching. They don't want to give you any real answers as to why they didn't go with you, because number one, it's uncomfortable to give people honest feedback. Number two, it might be legally an issue to give honest feedback. They don't want to say something that can potentially get them in trouble. And number three, they typically don't even know why they made the decisions they did. People make decisions and then they rationalize it. We make emotional decisions and then we rationalize it. And a lot of times it's death by committee as well. So the person giving you the feedback might not even know why their manager or their supervisor or the two people on the team that are loudest chose who they chose. So all good things to keep in mind. Kevin? We're missing your audio, man.
All right, how about now?
Now we got you.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm Kevin. So, biggest thing I'm concerned about is I am terrible at selling myself. I'm usually too honest about maybe my abilities, and I usually degrade my own abilities anyway. So that's kind of my big concern, how to talk myself up without feeling like I'm a liar.
I appreciate you saying that because that's going to be a big piece of today's conversation. The interesting thing about honesty, I find, is that, there are a lot of different ways you can tell a story, right? I mean, just look at the number of times they've retold Sherlock Holmes, right? Like the same story, very different every time they do it, right? But when we tell our story, because we have all of our own insecurities and full knowledge of everything that we're terrible at, we, like you said, tend to focus on what we're missing rather than what we have. And when we look at other people, because we don't know about their insecurities and we have no clue what their life is like, we only focus on the shiny positive things that, the internet tells us. And so that comparison gap gets really big. Hopefully today we'll be able to at least try and focus on a few stories that you can tell that we don't want to be falsely positive, but we do want to be accurate in the description of what we say, right? Because what ends up happening with folks is they'll say, "Oh, I'm really terrible at X, Y, or Z," or "I don't know this thing." And then I'll ask three more questions and they'll be like, "Well, I know this much of it." And I'm like, that's plenty. Let's just focus on what that little bit you do know rather than ignoring it and focusing on the insecurity. So definitely we'll talk about that more. And please, jump in anytime you have questions or want to go deeper into that. Renata?
Hi, so I'm Renata. Well, everything that those guys said. And I think my biggest fear, I don't know if fear, but from the interview standpoint is the question like, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what to say.
Yeah. All right. Well, good, because that's the biggest one that we're going to be talking about today. Today is all about tell me about yourself. And I start every podcast off by putting my guest on blast and asking them that question. And 99% of the time, they ramble and rant and don't have a good answer. So even professionals on podcasts don't know how to answer that question. So we'll dig into it. We'll find a simple way by the end of today for you to practice answering that question. I have a formula that I'll give you that you can fill out, and then it's going to be very formulaic, but then you can, as you practice it, get more colloquial with it. So we'll definitely be addressing that. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to get into it, and feel free again to interrupt me, raise your hand, put a question in the comments, or just chime in if you have things that you need more clarification on. And we will jump into the presentation now. In just a second. Now we got it working. All right. So today is the perfect post-grad pitch. And I already sort of introduced myself. Again, I'm the founder of Career Therapy. Basically, what I do with this company is I just try and help stressed out job seekers navigate the emotional roller coaster that is the job search. It's a pain. There's both emotional stuff and promotional stuff that you have to deal with. And motivation in those downtimes is going to be typically the hardest part. How do you get back to the tactics that you need to do? The tactics aren't terribly hard. It's emailing people, submitting applications. I can tell you coding a website is a lot harder than, applying for jobs. But the emotional side of applying for jobs is a lot harder because we don't want to do it. We don't want to sit and fill out an application and upload it and then have to refill in all those spaces because they didn't translate everything from our resume correctly. So the emotional side of the draining nature, the tedious nature of it, and the emotional rejection of not hearing back from people, that's really the hardest part, in my opinion, of the job search, because we tend to fill in the gaps with our biggest fears and insecurities, right? So almost every day, someone will say to me, "Oh, I got ghosted by this company." And I'll say, "Okay, so it's been a few months since you've heard from them?" And they'll go, "No, it's been like a day." And I'm like, "No, then you haven't been ghosted yet." Companies are slow, their processes are broken, and they do not have their shit together. So what we need to do is be patient, be empathetic, and be understanding so that when they do finally come around, we can be the positive person that gets, basically outlasts everyone else and gets the role. So today what we're going to focus on is the words you're using, the stories you're telling, and the pitch you're ultimately going to be giving people while doing your job search. And this starts, of course, with our words. So who do you think we're going to be encountering in the job search? What types of folks? What roles at companies, types of people will we come across in our job search?
Recruiters,
Recruiters, always the first answer. I love it.
HR people,
HR people. Who else?
If you make it far enough, like the head of engineering or head of data.
Directors, potential peers, maybe CEOs. We might run into a lot of different people, managers, employees, other job seekers. We'll run into a lot of those, especially when networking. So there's a ton of different people that we're going to run into: recruiters, hiring managers, and each person, we're going to want to tailor the way we talk a little bit to who they are. So if you think about, typical sales, marketing, etc., the best marketing is the marketing that knows who you are, knows what you want, and then talks directly to that, right? If I get a message saying, I don't know, "Hey, do you want, I don't know, what's something I don't like? I'm blanking on things around the holidays, but like, if you get offered something, like let's say you hate eating at McDonald's and you're getting McDonald's ads all day, every day, you're going to just get annoyed because you're not being targeted correctly. So what we want to be doing when we're talking to folks is understanding who we're talking to, understanding what it is they care about, and then talking in that perspective. So how should we be speaking to them? We want to speak to them from a them first perspective. Here's what I typically hear when talking to job seekers. I say, what problems do you solve for companies? And the response I get is, I like to solve problems. And I go, what problems? Well, I like to solve complicated problems. What kinds of complicated problems? I can't speak today. Technical, complicated problems. And I go, okay, well, what do you want in your next job? I want a company that will train me, that will give me mentorship, that it has a supportive environment. And I go, that's great. That pays well. Okay, cool. Stop. What does any of this have to do with why they would help you, right? If you want mentorship, if you want good pay, if you want all these things, we're very clear on what we want as job seekers, what problems we want this company and this job to solve, right? I want this job to pay my bills, and I want this job to mentor me, and I want this job to get me to my next job, and I want all these things. But what are we providing the company that solves their problems to a high enough degree that they are willing to spend all that money and time training and paying us, right? And this, I think, is where the imposter syndrome typically kicks in, because we are like, oh, I'm just graduating. I need to learn. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know yet, right? Oh, let me let a participant in here. And then I ask you what the ROI is of the work you do, and that brings up a lot of worry and insecurity, right? So does anyone have an idea of the types of problems you like to solve for companies? Or maybe if that's too specific, what types of problems do companies typically have?
I think sometimes lack of training. I guess I'm just kind of speaking from my background, where I used to train new hires and things like that. So I feel like if I was going somewhere else, I would kind of try to address problems with not people not knowing things as well as they should, or not having like a go-to person for like a subject matter expert or something like that.
Okay, so some internal organization training stuff. Cool. So people problems. So companies have people problems. What other kinds of problems do companies have?
Like follow through problems. At least I used to work in like recruiting, and I assume with recruiting and sales, a lot of issues where leads don't get followed through and sort of just disappear into the abyss of Salesforce and other structures.
Yeah. So issues with their internal technologies and processes not being fully working. And what does that lead to? You mentioned that sales might not come through, right? So if people aren't using the technology that is being implemented, which is a big thing, and they're not being trained on that technology, so I'm touching on both Ryan and Ben's points. So if there's new technology being implemented in the company and people are not being trained properly, what ends up happening is the company isn't making the sales that they need to justify the cost of that new software. And therefore, the revenue doesn't make sense and the company is hurting because of that. So we have revenue problems, we have sales problems, people problems, technology problems. So already we've listed a handful of things that you can help with as an employee. And some of these things are very related to software. Some of these things are ancillarily related, but we want to think from a business building perspective when we go into this job search. Everyone who's trying to find a job is saying, I want money so I can pay my bills. And while that's true, and that's an honest story, it's not the full story. Because if I were just to pay you a ton of money to sit at a desk all day and stare at a wall and you weren't allowed to look at a TV or a computer or your phone, you would go literally insane and want to quit that job in like a day and a half. So maybe not. Kevin's shaking his head. Maybe a month of staring at a wall might drive you insane. But there's a reason that we left our old jobs or that we didn't want to get into certain jobs. It's because not every job and every paycheck is right for us, right? There's a reason why someone spends a ton of money trying to become a lawyer and then stops before they graduate and just has a bunch of debt and no law degree. It's because it's not the amount of money they're being paid doesn't justify what they're doing. So we need to sit down and we need to say, I chose this path for these reasons. I know what I want out of a job, which is mentorship and all this other stuff, money and everything. But when I sell myself to the company, they already know that. Like that baseline is set. They know I want money. They know I want mentorship. So I need to go to the next level and explain why my interest in their company is going to help them make enough money to pay me my salary and train me in these tools. So thinking about the ROI really helps us stand out in the job search, and it shifts us from a me first to a them first mindset. And the biggest place that you can see this is in a cover letter. I don't know if any of you have written a cover letter yet, but 99% of cover letters I read start with, my name is, I want this, I do this, I'm this is I and me and my and all that stuff. I literally read someone's cover letter and every sentence started with I, me, or my. Every sentence, top to bottom. It was amazing. So what we want to do is literally change our language to try and be more them focused, we focused, collaborative in our talking. So when someone says, tell me about yourself, going back to the question that we're going to talk about today, we want to talk about ourselves, but we only want to talk about ourselves insofar as it relates to what they care about. So if I got on here today and I said, hey, everyone, my name is Martin, and I grew up in Arlington Heights. I like to draw on my iPad in the evenings. I really enjoy Scrabble. You're like, hey, man, we got like job stuff we're worried about. Could you get to the point, right? Like already you're bored listening to me. And so like, hey, my favorite movie is, I don't know, like the new Pixar movie Soul. Like if I just go on a rant about that, you're like, get to the point. Let's bring it back to what we care about. So I pitch myself or introduce myself in the way that you care about, right? So if you go back to my pitch, it's I help you utilize these marketing and communication tactics to get money back from companies. Now, I wouldn't necessarily use that same pitch when talking to a company, but that's what I use when I talk to you guys because that's what you care about, right? You want to go get that check. So these are the things that are going to help us shift our mindset and stand out from other seekers. Any questions on the me first versus them first mindset here?
Sorry. Hey, I'm Blair. I joined in late. A little
Thanks for joining, man.
distracted. Yeah. So how do you start your cover letter then? You're
So
trying to talk to them.
yeah, so typically the way I actually have a template that I can share with you. Typically the way we start a cover letter is we say your company is doing these great things. Those things resonate with me because of my background in doing X, Y, and Z. And together, I think we're going to be able to do some great stuff in this role. Second paragraph. Here's the background that I have that proves that I can help. Third paragraph. I'm really excited to bring value to the team. Thank you for considering my application. Really simple. And I actually, most cover letters are being written like it's still the 1980s and we're faxing them to people. I think no one will read that. And no one will read cover letters generally. But if we're going to write a cover letter, we might as well make it the way that people actually read. So I try and do 3 paragraphs or less, as short as possible, because I just know people have short attention spans. So if you think about emailing back in like 2011, I'd get emails that were 17 paragraphs long with 13 call to actions. No one's ever going to respond to an email that long anymore. So it's got to be like a few paragraphs, one thing that you want to really hit home. And so that's typically how I would set it up. Does that answer your question fully? Cool. Any other questions around that kind of stuff? All right, we'll dig into the next slide here. So how are we currently describing ourselves? Does anyone want to answer the question? Tell me about yourself real quick. I know no one wants to, but is anyone brave enough to give it a shot? Ryan, I'm seeing you smile. I'm gonna call on you.
Oh no.
It's all right.
All
This
right.
is your time to get it wrong. So no pressure.
Yeah, fair. So just like in an interview situation or like
Yeah, in an interview
sick.
situation. Hey, thanks for coming in. Excited to meet you. Tell me about yourself.
Cool. My name is Ryan. I just wrapped up. Well, I don't know if okay, I'll just go with that. My bad. My name is Ryan. I just wrapped up a coding boot camp called Coding Temple. Went over some Python and Flask and a lot of other really great things, and I'm pretty good at them now. And I'd like to apply that and work with you to solve lots of problems. And that's the best I got right now on the spot.
I love it. I love it. Hey,
Not-
you did a good job. Bravo. Everyone, a round of applause for Ryan for being brave. I like it. So yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. Hey, I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role. Is that basically what everyone had going through your heads, whether or not you said it out loud?
I had something along the lines of, "Hi, I'm Blair. Your company sucks, and I'm here to solve all your problems." And make it easier."
That's what's up. I like the confidence, Blair. Anyone else? All right, we'll go with that. I think Blair has it down pat. No, lesson over. We can end early today. So what do you think they hear when we say this stuff? When we say, I recently graduated, I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role. What do you think the hiring manager is hearing?
I'm really new and I have no idea about the workforce.
Yeah.
I mean,
Any other
graduated
thoughts?
college.
And
Go ahead.
but willing to learn.
So there's a little bit of positive. I'm willing to learn. So that's good. Dan is saying, I don't have experience. Yep. So that's the negative. Anything else? That's about
This
it, right?
person is naive, and I am not sure how I'm going to manipulate them yet.
Oh, the
Which
manipulation.
doesn't necessarily mean negative, but yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. They're hearing, hi, I'm inexperienced, unemployed, and I need you to teach me. So when we say, I recently graduated and I'm excited to learn, they hear, I'm inexperienced and need you to teach me. So how do we answer these questions in a different way that's more productive? That's what we're trying to say. So what do they want to hear? With them. This is an old idea from the marketing world. What is in it for me? They want to know how your skills that you do have, because you've all gone through a boot camp. So how do the skills that you do have, not the ones you don't have, but the ones that you do have, how are those going to help my business? I've got business problems. I've got people problems. I've got tech problems. I've got all sorts of problems. I've got customer problems. How can you help me with my problems? If you can help me with my problems, I can pay you money. And that's the transaction of a job, right? So what is in it for them? Here's what we should say instead. But before, what do you think we should say instead?
Something like, hi, I just recently graduated from a boot camp learning all these great new technologies that I think would be really helpful for your company.
All right. I like that. It's a little on the vague side. We'll get more specific, but it's in the right direction. Any other thoughts?
Hi, I'm Blair. I'm a software developer who, with a focus on automation and eliminating redundancy.
Bravo, Blair. I like that. Yeah. You say exactly what you are. You're not a recent graduate. You are a software developer. You focus on automation and you can help reduce redundancies. So you're saying exactly what problem you can help them solve. So, hi, I heard you have big goals for your business. Here's how I can help you solve your problems and grow. So that's exactly what you just did. You said every company has redundancy issues. I'm someone who helps automate those redundancy issues. which will be hugely beneficial because then it will save the number of hours people spend dealing with those redundancies. It'll make your customers happier. It'll make your teams more efficient, and it'll save you and make you money. Perfect. So here's a few questions that I'd like us to ponder for a little bit. What problems do companies have? And what skills do you have that solve these problems, right? So as a career coach, I know that every single job seeker at some point in their job search is going to get rejected. And they're going to want to punch a wall or yell or get depressed or cry or scream or whatever the thing is that emotion that they feel. And it'd be weird to just do that on your own or to do that to a manager, to do that to a teacher. So one of my roles as a career coach is to give people the space to vent. And so people often come to me just to get stuff off their chest, to be like, this person was a dick. This interview was awful. This company treats me terribly. I never want to work here. And just to like get it all out of their head so that they can go back to work and be productive. I think venting is a very productive thing. And so one of the skills I bring is a non-judgmental ability to let someone vent about whatever the hell they want to vent about so that they can get back to work. Ooh, we got a dog on the call. How do we do? What's the pup's name?
This is Nala.
Nala. Oh, so cute.
She's needy today.
I love it. I love having guests on the call. So that's what we want to think about, right? So companies need to make more money. How does being a developer help a company make more money? Companies need to reduce the number of clicks on their website to increase sales. How do you help them do that? Companies have redundancy issues, which you can automate. How do you do that? They have bugs that you can fix. How do you do that? That is what we want to be focused on. So when someone says, tell me about yourself, we can say, I am a software developer. I really enjoy helping companies with these types of issues. And I'm looking forward to learning more about this role in order to see what kinds of things your company is trying to accomplish and see where I can help. And that's the big shift, right? So rather than saying I'm looking to learn, which is great, everyone should be looking to learn, we're saying I can already bring value, plus I'm going to keep learning. It's an add-on to learn. And this brings us to our stories. So it's good to say things. It's better to tell a story, right? So if I were to tell you, hey, I'm Martin and I'm a really empathetic person. Well, immediately the red flag goes up that goes, why is this person telling me that they're empathetic? They might be lying. I don't know if I trust this person. I need an example, right? So if you tell me you're a hard worker, the first thing that goes through my head is, I'd really like an example of you, working hard on something to be able to believe that, right? If someone just comes up, like, let's say, I don't know, you're on you meet someone, they're like, hi, I'm a really nice guy. Like already it's sinister. Like, why is this person telling me that they're so nice? They're probably not, right? Like, we don't want to say it. We want to show it. And if you think about it, like a movie, the worst movies are the ones that are just filled with exposition. Just two characters sitting there telling you the plot. That's what Christopher Nolan is always getting yelled at about, right? It's like, why are we just sitting here talking for 20 minutes? And he's like always changing the scenery because it's so boring. He has to do something to keep it moving forward, right? And don't get me wrong, I love Christopher Nolan movies, but that's the critique. Versus a movie that will show you, like Pixar movies or Disney movies, like they're able to show you without any words an incredible story in the first 5 minutes of Brave or whatever. And you don't even need to hear anything. You can just kind of see it and get it. Or the beginning of Tarzan. I watched a lot of Pixar over break. Anyway, so when we are out there talking to people, we want to be telling stories because they get the point across better. You pull up the chat here. I'm seeing some chat stuff going on. Right.
It was just what you remind me of.
Oh, cool. No worries. I'll look at it later. How do we tell them what we do? So, like I just said, we need to communicate our skills and abilities by telling Stories. I think the best way to think about this is if I were to say, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. I do mock interviews all the time with people, and the general answers I get for that question are, well, this one time I was working at this company and we were trying to get this project done. It was something tech related, and this person on the team and I didn't really get along, but we sort of had to hash it out and figure it out, and we figured it all out and everything was good, and we were able to get the project done. And I'm sitting there going, what was the company? What was the project? What was the goal? What was the conflict? Who was this person? How was it like, I have no context, right? It was so high level and so vague. But when we're not practiced in interviewing and communicating, that tends to be what we do. Or tell me your strengths and weaknesses. Oh, well, I'm really goal oriented that's my strength. And then I procrastinate. That's my weakness. And I go, procrastinate what? Procrastinate eating well? Procrastinate your work? Procrastinate when you say you're detail oriented in what way? Technical, financial stuff? Like, what are the things that we're talking about? So it's good to give context and tell stories. So when you're thinking about this, and let's go back to that main question of tell me about yourself. So often we just kind of give them a lot of rambly information about our lives, right? We say, hi, I grew up here. I went to school here. I've done these things, and now I'm talking to you. But what is a story that we could tell in that introduction that would actually be helpful for them to hear? Does anyone have any thoughts?
Something that tells them about our personality.
Absolutely. Something about your personality. Telling them why you made the changes in your career that you did, right? So a lot of times we want to ignore our past and just let it go. I'm focused on what I'm doing now in the future, right? But what we've done in the past has gotten us here today. That's why when I introduce myself, I let you know that I started my career in marketing, moved into advertising and education, and then eventually got into career coaching. And the reason I tell that story is to provide context for my approach to work. So for you, let's say you started out in sales and now you're in development. Well, why did you start in sales? Why did you leave sales? And how do your sales skills translate into your web development skills, right? Maybe you're very personable. Maybe you're good at doing user interviews. Maybe you're, whatever the thing might be, great at dealing with clients. Those are all things that we want to bring in. So we could say something like, well, I started my career in the world of sales, doing a lot of outbound sales and upselling. It taught me how to talk to people on the phone, how to run meetings, and how to help people with problems in real time. I realized that I was much better at the technical side of things than the sales side of things because I was getting really good at implementing automated systems for our sales processes. So that led me into coding, where now I'm really good at building these automated systems, but also helping clients understand why they're important, helping them implement them and train employees with that sales skill that I have. So I have really good social skills, but also really good technical skills, and they come together to help with these automated processes. I'm excited to learn about the types of things your company is trying to automate and see where I can bring value to the team. See how that story kind of brings it together and then ties it into their needs at the end. Let's make it a little easier. What is a weakness that you have? Let's just go around. What's a weakness that you? So if someone says, "Well, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses," what is a weakness you might talk about?
One of my weaknesses is that I tend to obsess or so when a problem comes up, I will laser focus on that, which is really great for solving that one problem, but it can mean that other things get left on the side.
Very cool. Anyone else have examples?
Kind of going off that, feel similarly. I just kind of like get hyper focused on one thing, but in that sometimes I'm so concerned with getting it done that my attention to detail kind of wanes a little bit, or sometimes might have a hard time focusing. So kind of those two things combined.
Totally. So listen to how you both answered that question, and I appreciate you sharing it in that way. You talked very high level about the problem, where it would be better if you gave me an example. So I tend to get laser focused, or I tend to get myopic about a problem when I encounter it. An example of this is I was working on a project for a company, or I was working on a project in class, and we had 4 or 5 different things we needed to get done. I started on the first one, and I got so drilled into getting that right that I ended up having to rush the last 2 parts of the project, which were this and this. And I didn't get a chance to really see the full picture. So one of the things that I'm constantly trying to do now is structure my time at the beginning of a project and plan things out so that I have reminders that help me get out of that hyper-focused mode and see the full picture so I don't get too far down a path. And you can get even more specific by saying what the project was and so on. I'm just kind of giving the broad strokes here. But what are your thoughts on that, Ryan and Blair? Do you have an example that comes to mind?
My thought on that is that at what point do the stories take up too much time? An interview is only so long. Like each one of these stories just takes away from the time that people have interviewed. Yeah,
that's a great point. So the key thing about an interview is that if it's about striking a good tone. The things that we want to convey in networking, interviewing, etc., is trust and helpfulness. So I want them to trust me, and I want them to know that I'm here to help. And so if I'm just giving really short answers and they're not real, like we're being so vague that they can't really get an understanding of how we work, it erodes trust. It'd be like you're trying to open up with someone and be vulnerable, but you're just not giving them the actual detail that they need to really know what the heck you're talking about. So it's like there's this one hilarious comedian online, and she's like, people on Facebook who complain about things. They're like, hey everyone, I need your thoughts and prayers because things are bad right now. They're really bad right now, and I just need your thoughts and prayers. I won't get specific and I won't tell you what's happening, but please, your thoughts and prayers. And you're immediately like, what's this person doing? Like, can you tell me what happened, or don't say anything at all? Like, this vagueness just makes me not know why. Like, are you looking for pity points? Like, what is going on here? Like, so it's good to be succinct. And I'm not very succinct. I'm very rambly, but it's good to be succinct. But it's also important to be specific. So specific and succinct is probably the best way to go to answer your question. Not giving enough detail will let them fill it in with whatever is in their mind. And if you sound like someone that, in your case, I get so myopic on this that sometimes I let other things go. What do you think they're going to think when you say that and you keep it broad?
You just don't get your work done.
Yeah, you don't hit deadlines. So basically, when we say, what's your weakness? And you give that answer, the person listening says, oh, so you're not going to hit the deadlines. Got it. But they never got any context, right? And so this brings us into another part, which is when we tell our stories, we want to choose stories that are actually helpful for the person asking the question, right? So both of you gave me an answer that is personal and something that matters to you, right? Because you're currently in class trying to get projects done, and you're currently getting like hyper focused on things and probably getting stressed out, right? But does that actually help me put you on a team, right? And so every question that we get asked in the interview process, in the job search, there's 2 questions to every question. The first question is the literal question. And the second question is what they're trying to understand about you. So when someone says, tell me about yourself, what do you think they're really asking you? I mean, they're literally asking, just tell me about yourself. And I can say where I went to high school and I can say all these different things that don't matter. But what do you think they want to hear? What do you think they're really asking you? And it can be a variety of things.
How do you fit in?
How do you fit in? What else?
Like, what do you provide me?
What do you provide me? Yep. Whenever I hear tell me about yourself, because I'm always trying to be helpful with my thinking, right? When I hear tell me about yourself, what I hear is, I don't know how to start this interview. Can you start it for me? Because that's why every single interview starts with the most generic, most overused question. Because interviewers are not like super skilled. It's not like they go to interviewing school and become great interviewers. They're just like grabbed out of the cubicle stack and thrown into a room and said, interview this person. And they're like, I'm just as nervous as this person. And I don't want to look like a stupid person in front of my boss. So I'm going to download a list of questions from Google that we all have access to. And I'm going to ask the first one on the list. Tell me about yourself. Because I didn't do any research because I don't know what the hell I'm even doing here. Right. So they say, tell me about yourself. And I go, all right, how do I want to kick off this conversation? So I get to set the tone. So that's the way I like to hear it. Other ways I like to hear it is, you know, what is your perspective on this role? That's another way you can think about it. So everyone should have a perspective on what they do, right? Like I think that taking an emotional and promotional approach to coaching is a really great way to do coaching, and that's how I do it. Other people are more data focused, right? So they're going to be like, oh, I'm a really data heavy coach and I love tracking and I love doing all this other stuff, right? So what is your personal approach to development that's maybe different than someone else in the class? Does anyone have an example?
What do you mean by personal approach to development?
So do you really like getting into the weeds of the back end? Do you really enjoy APIs? Do you really enjoy front end? Do you enjoy more of the design aspect, more of the research aspect, more of the customer focused aspect, so on and so forth? Like
cool.
we can,
Sorry, I thought you meant like
oh, yeah.
personal development or something like that.
Yeah.
Sick. Okay. Personally, like web development, I think front end stuff is kind of where I feel happiest.
Cool. And why?
I like the more like creative side of it, the kind of almost like painting a picture with code in a way, if that makes sense.
Yes. So I'm going to pause you. Imagine the difference between tell me about yourself. Hi, I'm Ryan. I recently graduated from a boot camp. I'm really looking to get into my first role and learn. And hi, I'm Ryan. I really love the creative side of code and almost like painting with zeros and ones. I got to this point with my background in blank, and I'm really excited to learn more about this role to see what sort of creativity we can bring to your online presence.
That's spicy. I love it.
Yeah, spicing it up. And of course, everyone has their own style, and I'm a little bit more verbose. But the point here is that we're getting to something that has personality, that has a perspective, that gives them information to make decisions on. So let's say we go back to the strengths and weaknesses question. When we say, I get myopic about this problem, well, most people get myopic about problems, right? So it's not really a weakness that helps me put you on a team, right? If I'm assessing you in an interview, I'm assessing how do I put this person on the team? What tasks should I give them, right? So typically what I like to do for the strengths and weaknesses question, instead of answering the literal question, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Which if I were to tell you my strengths and weaknesses and just kind of use my whole life as my strengths and weaknesses, my weakness is I have insomnia and I'm very tired all the time. Does that help you know anything about me as a coach or as anything? Like, does that help at all? No, not really. I would never say that in an interview because it doesn't make any sense. Like, what does that matter to them? As long as I wake up in time for the meeting, they're fine. And so what we need to be asking ourselves is what strengths and weaknesses help this person or this company know what work to give us, right? So for me personally, when someone says, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I say my strengths are my ability to sit with anyone, no matter how they're feeling, and help them through that emotion. Specifically, I've helped people with, while coaching, I've had people talk to me about their divorces. I've had people talk to me about suicide. I've had people just get on the phone and cry for 10 minutes straight. And I'm able to sit there and handle that and then get them back to being productive in their job search afterward. And I can give a specific example if I want to. My weakness is data and data analysis and spreadsheets. I can do the basics. I can track things. I can work with the data team. But if you ask me to create predictive models of when people are going to get jobs, just not my thing. I'm going to have a hard time with that. And I know that because in my last job at this company, and I would say the company, the first day I sat down and they said, here's a spreadsheet, start putting together predictive analysis on when people will get jobs. And I went, say what now? And I was like, I don't have any clue how to do that. And they were like, well, you just use this really quick equation. And I was like, equations? I can't even do math in my head. So what I'm telling the people in the interview is, on this team, if you need someone who can sit with your students and really be there and help them through like the emotional roller coaster of the job search, I'm the right coach. If you need someone who's going to be back end doing data stuff, I'm not the right coach. And that's actually served me because I've not gotten jobs that are heavy data. And that's a good thing because I wouldn't have been great in those jobs. And I have gotten jobs that are heavy customer focused and student focused because I'm right for those roles. And so for each of you, I'd like for you to say, instead of what are your strengths and weaknesses, answer the question, if we were to put you on a project right now, what role would you want to be 80% of your job? And what role would you want to be 20% of your job? So think back to the projects you've done in course or things you've done at old jobs. If you could minimize this part of your job to 20%, what part would it be? And if you could do the rest of, if you could do this part 80% of your job, what would that be? So I'd love to let you chew on that for a second and feel free to unmute and share your thoughts. A typical example of this, because I'm seeing some confused looks, would be I really love getting deep into the data analysis. I love pulling from APIs and putting together detailed spreadsheets to help companies analyze their customer data and so on and so forth. That would be a strength. And a weakness is that I'm not a great public speaker. So the two things kind of balance themselves out, right? So I really love being deep in the data. I'm not so great at public speaking. So what I like, my favorite thing is when I'm on teams where we have a few people on the team who are really extroverted, who love doing client conversations and presentations in front of, CEOs and stuff like that. And I can work with them to understand the data, present it properly, and make sure that all the right information is being collected and shown in these meetings. I'm the data person and I can work really well with the presentation person. That's a really strong strength weakness that shows where they should put you on the team.
Hi, so I'm Blair, and I'm particularly strong at puzzle solving. By that I mean being presented with unique problems that don't necessarily have a solution established, and trying to find workable solutions that not only solve the problem, but also work with the system that we're currently working with. For example, in my previous role as a project manager for a disaster relief organization, we were tasked with these problems all the time because you never know what kind of damage a house is going to have from a hurricane, whether it's going to be multiple floors, whether it's safe, whether there's asbestos. And our team was filled with volunteers, people who may never have held a hammer. So trying to find ways to involve our volunteers, train them properly and safely, and also simultaneously get these houses completed for these people who have been affected by a disaster was a constant problem. And our volunteers never stayed very long. So making sure we can do that consistently, never knowing who we're going to get, was incredibly fun. Though unfortunately, I am a very honest and direct and often hypercorrect person. So what that means is that we have volunteers coming in and day out. I was not very good at getting the message or the solution to the problem out to the people because it was fairly off-putting. So I've had to put a lot of time and effort into making sure I get to know everybody who walked through the door personally, so I can at least understand where their comfortability levels are and what their communication style is, so I can adapt to that. It's not something that comes naturally to me, so I work very hard to make sure I can do that on a regular basis.
That was perfect.
Fired.
Yeah. Look at that compared to I get hyper focused on a problem. You know, that tells me so much more about where to put you on the team. And it also prepares me for the eventuality that you might, give me a curt response to something. And I just know that that's part of who you are. And that's totally fine. I'm not going to take it personally. Right. And like that kind of stuff really helps. How did that feel for you?
It felt like I was just telling you what my girlfriend tells me about me.
That's a great way to put it. I think a lot of times outsourcing our answers to someone else is a good way to go. When someone asked me my strengths and weaknesses, one of my old hacks was to look at what my old manager said in my feedback reports from my old job, because I actually appreciated her feedback. It wasn't just BS. And I said, well, my old manager says this and this and this. And then I don't even have to justify it. I literally have that person's back. And like that really does help kind of get it out of our insecurities and into just the rational world. And I think that's the big thing that we're trying to do here is get away from answering questions and doing the job search from an insecure place to just a at least neutral place. Like I'm not necessarily saying we're going to like sprint up into confidence, but I'd like to get us out of insecurity. And so if we can just get to neutral and speak about things plainly rather than emotionally, I think that's a great place to go. And a good example of that is like, tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. This is one where typically we will tell stories, but we'll tell too much of a story. We'll be like, oh, this B that I worked with is such a D and I can't stand their face. And like all of a sudden the interview that we're in goes from like happy-go-lucky, wonderful to like this odd, angry tone. And it's very hard to get out of that once you're in it. It's happened to me. And so that's where we want to really tell that story a dozen times so that if it comes up, we don't immediately get transported back to an old emotion. We want to be able to talk about it as though it happened to someone else. And that's how we want to talk about a lot of the stuff in our job search. Go ahead.
So one of the questions I have is in my previous role, again, with this problem that I have is speaking to people in very correct terms. And I've adjusted it by telling stories or trying to explain a concept almost as if I'm on drunk history. But one way or the other, I'm kind of screwed until I actually get to know that person, because either I make people feel I sound condescending because the language is too correct or too jargony, or people feel either way I sound condescending. One, I'm being an elitist, or the other, I may think that they're dumb. Now, in an interview setting, I'm listening to your language and you're using fairly high level language that I don't think is something I would use with the volunteers that came in the door. But in an interview setting, I'm not exactly sure where you choose. How do you choose that level of language when you're speaking?
It's a good question. This is where we have to kind of draw on other strengths. So you, in just the interaction we've had so far in the last hour, you've also shown a bit of self-awareness and a bit of humor. And both of those things can be used to soften the rougher edges. So if you think about like a comedian getting on stage, the first thing they do is talk about their appearance because they know people are thinking it. So they diffuse it early. So like Jim Gaffigan had a good example. Like he gets on stage and he's like, I know what you're all thinking. Does this guy know he's fat? It's like, yeah, I know. And like the whole thing, he does that to like, he's like, I know I had to tell that joke so that you would feel relaxed for the next joke that I'm going to tell. And so what we can do is maybe early on be like, hey, you know, I'm this kind of person. Or, you know, I tend to focus a lot on like the emotional side of things because I'm a career coach. So I get really early on, I let them know that I'm going to be talking a lot about like emotional stories and stuff so that they're ready for it when they come. So probably the best example I could give, let's say you screw something up. You really go off the deep end and you're like rambling in a story. Most people will freeze or get stuck or not know what to do. The best thing we can do in that situation is to go, I'm really sorry. Sometimes I get really excited about these things and I just go off on tangents. Let me get back to your question. Your question was, restate the question and then give a succinct answer. So it's more about the recovery when something goes wrong than trying to avoid the thing going wrong, if that makes sense. So if you catch yourself being a little bit more like harsh or something, or you're coming off in a certain way, you can call it out. You can be like, you know, sometimes I get really just, you know, into this stuff and it comes across really intense. I just want to be clear. Here's what I'm trying to say. And like say it in a little bit more of a calm way. Granted, everyone's a little bit different. I wouldn't say everyone go use humor because then someone will be sarcastic and piss someone off. So, you know, we all have to find our own little niche in how we say things. Does that help answer your question?
A little bit, I guess. The question is more like, is it over the course of the interview as you're developing this rapport with the interviewer that you decide what level to be at? Or like, I don't know, maybe it's just my problem showing is that like I am not good at that situation of the whole reading the other person. That social interaction just does not. I mean, I'm going into software. Like it's just not something I'm good at. And so that personal interaction, like I tend to lean on some form of humor or something.
Yeah.
But like I can't tell whether I'm either making someone, in what way am I making someone feel dumb very well.
Sure. Well,
and yeah, I guess gauging that.
I would say just strive for neutral at the beginning and then reveal more as you go, right? So it's almost allowing it to be a bit of a slower reveal than it is anything else. And again, I'm not saying like you have anything that you need to hide. I'm saying like if you're worried about it, let it be a slow burn. I honestly, I don't think it's something that we have much control over. Like I am who I am. And like anytime I try to change it, it comes off weird. So there are times where I've tried to be like way more animated and people are like, this dude's weird and I don't like him. And then I'm just kind of talking monotone in my live stream and people are like, I love this. This is great. And I'm like, really? All right, fine. I get to just be myself. So what I would say is don't worry about the people so much that don't click with you. There are plenty of people that don't click with me. Anyone who's like into data and starts talking to me and I glaze over and I don't know what the hell they're talking. Like I had an interview once that I wasn't even trying to have. Like this person just kind of cornered me at this startup hub and he started interviewing me for his company. It was so weird. And he's like, yeah, so we're going to get you on our sales team and you're going to be doing, I'm like, I'm not a salesperson. And so he's like, and here's what we're going to do. You know, you get this many clients at this percentage and that's, and I was like, oh, you want me to do math? I can't do math in my head. I was like, I don't know. And he goes, well, it's this number. And he keeps going. And then he goes, oh, and then also you have this many clients at this rate. And that would be, I go, oh, I didn't learn how to do math in the last 3 minutes. So I don't know what you want from me. And like, it was so awkward. And, you know, thankfully it wasn't a real interview. So I got to be a little bit more just like, I don't know what you want from me, man. But, like that kind of stuff, like I think it's too hard to be something else. We're not actors. Unless you're a trained actor and you're really good at that, go for it, I guess. But it's better to just be the most helpful version of ourselves rather than trying to be something completely different. And eventually you'll click with someone. Like I'm enjoying the questions here. So far, so good. So how do we actually begin these stories? One of the things that I want us to think about is our past. So I'd love maybe just to go around really quick. What did you do before the boot camp? We'll start with Matt.
So I just graduated from U of M in May, and I was pre-med, and then started self-studying some computer science because I was really interested in it, and then started the boot camp.
Cool. Why pre-med?
Well, I was always pretty interested in those science classes, and then I had an accident, a boating accident, and kind of saw firsthand like all the different kinds. 'Cause I was in the ER, and then I was in surgery, and then I was doing PT. So I was kind of pretty impacted by that. So then I was like, oh, maybe I'll like to go into medicine. And then I did some clinical rotations over the summer and realized, nope, I don't want to work in the hospital.
What was it about the hospital that made you not want to work there?
I mean, well, I was in the OR doing like neurosurgery tech stuff. And I mean, those surgeries can last like 12 hours and you're not allowed to leave. So it was just kind of really intense environment, especially to be in as a college student. So, and it was kind of really repetitive. Like once you like the learning, there's a lot of new stuff, but then once you're on the job, like all of the cases are kind of very similar. So there's not a lot of like on the job learning every day to day, like solving new problems. So I didn't really like that as much either.
And you were in more of a tech role in that?
Yeah.
And so how did that, like, what was the decision to go from that to software?
Well, when I was looking for some different stuff to do my senior year of college, I ended up taking an introductory computer science course at U of M, and then fell in love with it.
Cool. And what is there anything that you did in pre-med that translates over?
I mean, I took some advanced math courses, some advanced physics courses, and then I mean, in pre-med, just kind of like the problem solving, like the analytical skills, and a lot of like chemistry classes and science classes that I had to take have kind of helped me, but not a lot of like directly related computer classes.
But a lot of technical kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when telling that story, a lot of times it's like, oh, they're kind of unrelated, but everything is related, right? Because we're the constant. So what we want to say is something like, I started out in pre-med in my undergrad because I went through this experience. And actually, that's a very intriguing story. So I would definitely tell that story. That's something that people will remember. And then, so I had this experience. I went into pre-med. I got into this environment and I realized that while the technical side of it was really interesting, it lacked the ongoing learning and problem solving. So I transitioned into something that was equally as technical, but much more focused on problem solving on a daily basis. And that's how I changed from pre-med to software development. And that's how you connect the background to the present. And that's how you can also say, and so I'm curious to learn more about the types of problems you're trying to solve as a company and see how my technical background can help.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So that's the story arc. And that's what I want us each to think about. How did the past pave the way for your present, right? So does anyone else want to give it a shot? Break down their background? Oh, you're muted, Kevin.
He's outside.
Very, very quietly, we can hear you.
You gonna come inside? See daddy?
Here we go. Sorry, I'm disconnecting my microphone.
Kevin, you're turning into
All right,
Derek.
you can hear me now, right?
Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I want to hear how you connect my dots here.
Let's see.
So for the past 10 years, I've been a restaurant manager and been doing that. So that's my background, really. I did do biochemistry in college. That was so long ago. And I grew up coding, and that was always kind of something I enjoyed doing. That's kind of how I ended up doing what I'm doing now.
When you say you grew up coding, what kind of stuff?
So when I was like 14 or so, I started just getting into like computers. I started doing some freelance work. And that was, in the mid to late 90s when people were still using mimeograph documents and whatnot. So I took their old paper documents and digitized them, turned them into digital forms that they could fill out, so they could do it that way. So that led me into doing just web design, and I did some web design for some people. Went through all that kind of stuff. Started really enjoying all that kind of process. Learned a little bit of JavaScript back then, which was really basic in 1997, 1998. And then, then I started learning, database management systems don't exist anymore. Learned Basic, and some other languages that are pretty much defunct at this point. I just kind of always really enjoyed the logic behind it and thinking through all that kind of stuff. And then I did some IT work, working with AutoCAD and Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop in the early 2000s. And that's about how all the tech stuff I had back then. And then I did some research work, working with some visioning software and automating processing images and collecting data from the images back in like 2002, 2003.
Cool. And how'd you get into restaurants?
I just was doing it when I was in college, and I just really enjoyed doing it. So I just kind of kept with it for a long time and didn't really want to join the real world. And then got into restaurant management, and fun ride, but kind of over it at this point.
What'd you enjoy about it?
Loved I liked working the later hours. I'm more of a night owl, but I liked the working with people and meeting strange people and hearing their stories. Coaching teams, coaching people up was always kind of fun for me. Really enjoyed doing that. But people that didn't learn were always very hard for me to deal with.
Yeah.
That was kind of one of my biggest weaknesses with that.
And why do you want to get out of it now?
My passion's kind of died for it. I kind of went to a place where they worked me into the ground. And, I knew I always really enjoyed coding, and growing up, I always expected to be a coder when I grew up. And I decided it was time to make that switch, kind of follow my dreams.
Cool. So what I'm hearing here is you've always had the tech bug. You've had it at a young age for many years. Did you ever do any tech stuff outside of the restaurant stuff while you were there, like on the side?
Not outside. I did do some tech stuff for the restaurants. I did some report automation and stuff like that to make my job easier, and to just get a better feel for what's actually happening within the stores.
Perfect. So what we're going to say, like the way that your story arc goes is you were really into the tech stuff, really into coding. We're doing all these different kinds of projects and freelance stuff and so on. Then you got into management in the restaurant industry, and you started going through the management path. You really enjoyed dealing with people and developing teams and all that. While you were doing that, you were also utilizing your tech background to automate things in that job for yourself. And when it came time to make a change, you looked at what you've done when you were younger, what you were doing in that role in the automation and stuff, and decided to go back into more of a tech space. So now you have management experience, tech experience, and you were still thinking in that way while in that job. And now you want to make that 100% of what you do. So rather than being 20% of your job being the tech stuff, or 10% of your job being the tech stuff, and most of your job being management, we're flipping that. Now most of your job is going to be tech, and a small portion will be team building and being part of that environment, right? So it's more about changing the ratios of work than it is, oh, I burnt out, and all the negative stuff that we know, and everyone has been through that. It's all good. But in an interview, we want to be talking about, oh, while I was prepping for this transition, I noticed that I was doing this automation stuff that was really, felt good. I remembered back when I was working in these other projects that felt good. And now I want to turn that around. And probably a good place for you to focus your job search is helping restaurant companies or restaurant apps or delivery apps or any of those kinds of businesses that are focused on that industry, help them build their systems so that they can be more effective, right? That's a great niche for you because you have a background in that field. And right now, delivery services are everything, right? Like everyone's at home. So all of those places are booming and hiring like crazy. So it's a really good sort of arc there for you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that sounds about right for me. My final project for this course that we're doing was a point of sale mobile Android, Mac, or iOS app that would be a point of sale for a restaurant. So it's kind of following along with what you're saying there.
Very
Kinda,
cool.
That's
Very
stuff
cool.
I know, and I know how to apply, stuff to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great. So we'll probably dig into that a little more in a few slides, but I think it's a good starting point.
I just want to say that framing it as a story arc sounds so cool. It makes me feel like I'm in an anime, and it's just very exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah, all of my old presentations, actually, I think these are all pretty cartoony too, but they used to be like legit, like cartoon heavy, like Rick and Morty and stuff like that. So how do we talk about our studies then? Typically, we want to talk about what we learned in the boot camp rather than what we did. So everyone's like, well, I did this thing and I did this thing. And then they're like, well, did you do this thing? And we're like, no. And then we bomb the interview, right? What we want to say is, I did these things and here's what I learned. I learned how to debug a website. I learned how to think through customer problems with code and so on and so forth. So again, we want to tell stories. When we get stuck in this, well, I used Python or I didn't use Java or I did use this or that, that's when we start getting into like the looking at a job board and getting intimidated by the requirements. First of all, you only need about 60% of what's in that job board because every job board is copy pasted Frankenstein from 17 other job boards. And the people that write it have no idea what they're doing. And they're writing for this ideal unicorn that doesn't exist. Or if it did, they wouldn't have the money to pay the person. So job listings are pretty much BS. I don't even read them. I just look at the title. And if the title is the title that I want, I apply. And then I wait for the interview to actually read the rest of it. And then if I don't like it, hey, at least I got the interview and I got some practice in and I can turn the job down or they could turn me down and we're all good to go. It's better to get an interview for the wrong thing than to censor ourselves from applying to stuff. So I say go after everything, treat everything with a grain of salt. Basically, the mindset should be, I want everything until I get there, and then I want to be critical. Or when you're in the interview, I really want to work here until they give you an offer, and then you can be critical, right? So too often we get caught up in our heads. We're like, is this my dream job? Is this the industry? Is this I think it's good to batch industries like, oh, for the next month, I'm just going to look at ed tech companies, or for the next month, I'm going to look at finance companies or fintech, and keeping things batched to keep ourselves sane. But when it comes to like, is this a job I want or not? I wait till the offer to really think about that. I want every job until I see the offer on paper, because the job doesn't exist until it's on paper. And so, of course, I'm like all down unless I'm so busy, I got other things going on. But in the job search, That typically isn't the case. So we want to talk about our education in what we learned from our projects. So does someone have an example of a project that you worked on in the boot camp? Or are working on?
Like just any project or
Any
the
project. Just give
project
me
that we
give me a breakdown of what the project is and what you're doing.
So I'm really into data and machine learning. So my project was making a predictor for rent prices across America and training a model, uh, training a model to get that data and then use that data and let anyone else who wants to use that model use it. And I got that data from a data set on Kaggle that was open source. And I taught myself a lot of machine learning to get this model to work. And like many other things too that went into the process of developing that model that I learned that was more beneficial than just watching or reading about it.
Of course. So you just gave me a great breakdown of all the things you did. I love it. It's perfect. It's exactly what I asked for. Now I want you to tell us what you learned from that experience that's going to help you in future projects. So
So
go ahead.
no, did you have advice before
I was just going to
start?
keep rambling. I'm a rambler, so keep going.
Yeah, I'm not going to put them to sleep. Hopefully not. So I think I just learned a lot of different techniques and different classifiers, different algorithms to use, and when they're best used and different parameters to train. So I feel like whatever model I build next, I'll have a much better understanding and background of choosing which is the right model to use for whatever problem I'm looking at.
Perfect. So I built this project and I learned about how to select and define models for future projects. So when I'm working on your company's projects, I'll be bringing an eye to detail around the models that we're using and the experience that I've had up to this point. So it's about tying it to the next thing. So I did this, period, and it has taught me this, which will help me in this next role in this way, right? So if I just told you, oh, I got on the phone with someone and we talked through things and they got a job, you're like, cool, good for them. But if I say I talked through things, they got a job, the thing I learned from that conversation is that rejection and ghosting, or let's just use ghosting, that people think they've been ghosted way before they are. And so this person thought they were ghosted, but all they need to do is send a follow-up and all is well. So when I work with you, I'm going to make sure that we're not jumping to conclusions about being ghosted, and we're going to keep rational through this process. And for you, it's like when I'm working on this next project, I'm going to be looking at the models that we're using. I'm going to be analyzing them, making sure that they're working correctly. And I'm going to be sure that, you know, everything is being tested and so on. And I'm not technical, so I sound stupid now, but you get my point. Looks like we have another pet on the call, do we?
Me?
Yeah. Do we have another pet? What's...
Yeah, I have a little.
Hey there. Oh, so cute.
I thought it was gonna be your kid.
No,
Insensitive of me.
I got myself 3 little mice, and this guy is being trouble.
Oh,
Wait,
He's a
don't you
big
already
boy.
have a dog or a couple
I do.
dogs?
I have 2 dogs. Yes.
I love it. Animal friendly over here.
Yep.
All right. So digging back into the story arcs here. Does everyone know, whoops. Does everyone know about, like, I can't double click because we're in the presentation mode, but does everyone know about the just basic story arc of, you know, starting action, problem, climax, resolution? Has everyone had a, feel free to say no. I'll go through it. I'm seeing a lot of nods. Yes. Okay. So basically I'll just do real quick. every story has, I mean, there's lots of different ways to tell stories. There's the hero's journey, there's a ton of different stuff, but the most basic is just setting up the stage. And you can look at pretty much any movie and you'll see this play out. But you set the scene. So I was working on this project, and here's what it was. We were trying to build an app that did this thing. Then a problem arose. We were trying to build this app and we had an issue with the API. Then you go on the journey. Here are all the things that I was trying to do to fix the API issue. Then I came to an idea of something that would work, and that's the climax. I fixed it. After I fixed it, these things happened, and that's the falling action to resolution. And then now, because I went through that, I now know how to do this thing, and I can do that again in the future. It's a very basic story arc, right? So for me personally, I'll give a quick one. A question that I've been asked in an interview before is, tell me about a time that you found a limitation to your ability to help someone while coaching them. And there's a very clear one that comes to mind. It was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. I had a call with a brand new student. And the first thing that he did when we got on the call was pull out his old suicide note from before he went to the boot camp and showed it to me. And, you know, it's 9 o'clock on a Monday. I was very unprepared for this, but I could understand that he's gone through a bit of a journey, and I needed to do a few different things. I needed to make sure that he knew where my ability to help ended. I needed him to know that he was supported in whatever he needed. And what I ended up doing was saying, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. There are 3 different ways that we can proceed with coaching, depending on how you would like to proceed. And I laid out 3 options for him, and I let him choose. I said, do you want to just focus on the emotional side? Do you want to get tactical? Do you want to look at strategy? What do you want to do? And I also had to say, I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach. There is a limit to how much I can help with the emotional side of things, but I'm here to help, to listen and help you get connected with the right people when necessary. And the feedback I got from him was, thanks for not trying to fix anything and just letting me talk and giving me options. And what I learned from that experience is, number 1, where my limitations are. And number 2, that I shouldn't be trying to fix anyone with my coaching. I should just be trying to listen and guide and help them come to their own conclusions on things and give options. And that has helped me in the future with my coaching when other things have come up, like emotional issues, family issues, COVID issues, etc. And now I can handle those in the future. And so that story does a lot of different things. It shows my ability to be self-aware while coaching, to be empathetic, to sit with someone who's emotional, and all these different things without me telling you that I'm an empathetic person or that I can do these different things. You can infer all that from the story. And this is really what I'm trying to get at with all of you. You don't want to sit there and say, I'm a great guy. I'm a team player. I'm a hard worker. I am like, you want to show it through your stories so that they infer it and actually believe it, rather than, you know, if I just told you I'm super empathetic and never told you a story and then hung up the phone, you'd be like, that guy is full of himself, you know? And so these are the things that we want to do through our storytelling. And so hopefully this story arc helps out a little bit. All right. Any questions on story arc before we move forward? All right. Now, this is the slide that I always need to reiterate to myself because I know I am a talker. But how do I stop rambling? We already sort of touched on this, but the best thing you can do is when you're answering questions in an interview or talking to people while networking, or writing emails or doing cover letters, focus on a single call to action that you're trying to get to. A single story, a single point. Don't try and cover everything. So if someone says, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, almost 70% of the time people will go, my strengths are, and they list like 3 to 5 things. And my weaknesses are, and they list 3 to 5 things, and they give no examples. And I forget all of it because it's too much information. 1 story per question, 1 answer per question Tell me about your strengths. My core strength is this, and here's a story to back it up. Tell me about your weaknesses. My core weakness is, and tell a story to back it up. Conflict with a coworker. One conflict I had with a single coworker was this. Here's how we resolved it. Here's what I learned. Rather than this conflict and that conflict and the other thing, or, tell me about a time you're proud of your work. Well, I'm proud of this and that and this and that. I'm already overwhelmed. Just one time you've been proud and a story to back it up. So that's how we can be more specific and stop the rambling. Again, I'm a rambler, so you can yell at me for that. But how do we get it in the right order? A lot of times we want to order the stories around keywords, and we don't have to be chronological. So again, when we're thinking about what they care about, we can change the order of what we say, how we say, we can change things up as long as we keep coming back to that point. When you go into an interview or go into a conversation, the main things we want to do are build trust. And build rapport. So what we want to do is we want to say, what does this person need to know about me overall, right? If you're a politician and you get on stage, you're not sitting there going, I wonder what questions I'm going to be asked today, right? You go, here's the stories I'm going to tell. Let's see what questions they throw at me so I can weasel them into my stories. Now, I'm not saying be a politician, but what I am saying is learn a little bit from them. And when they say, tell me about a strength, you go, I know that this person cares about this information and this story illustrates that. So I'm going to answer that question with this story. And that's how we can pull things together. I'm being a little vague on this one, but let me know if you have questions. We can always come back. Now, when do we actually tell our stories? So these stories will typically become the basis of our elevator pitch, our LinkedIn summary, interview answers, and more. So we've touched on a lot of these things throughout. When it comes to your website, your about me on your website, right? This is where you can use some of this storytelling stuff and answer the question, tell me about yourself. When you pitch yourself, it's a shorter version of that. When you create your LinkedIn summary, it's a bit of a longer version of your elevator pitch. When you start an Instagram or Twitter, if you want to go that route, you do the same thing in your headers, and they're of varying lengths. So that's how we actually weave this stuff into the job search. So we go from learning how to communicate effectively to actually communicating effectively in your job search. And here's the main questions that I want you to write down right now and reflect on after today's presentations. What was my favorite project? What problem did I solve in that project? What skills did I use to solve that problem? And what outcomes did I get? And you can also toss in, and what did I learn that I'll take into my next job? Feel free to screenshot or write it down. All right, looks like everyone got it. Yeah. Cool. All right, next up, we're going to write your pitch. All right. So how do we pitch ourselves? Well, we've been talking about it all day, but basically your pitch is a simplified version of your overall story that gets your point across. Pretty simple. Here's a way that you can organize it that typically makes it easier to answer in an interview. Usually in an interview, we go chronological and it feels weird, right? Well, I went to school for pre-med and now I'm a developer. And it's like, all right, well, that didn't really connect. Why do we start with pre-med, right? Why are we starting with the thing that they don't care about? What we do want to do is reference the pre-med in relation to what they do care about. So that's why I like to say present, past, future. So I'm currently a software developer helping companies do X, Y, and Z. I got here through my background in pre-med doing really technical work and maybe telling that story that you told a bit earlier, Matt. And that led me into software development. And I'm really excited, now we're getting into the future, to learn more about your company's needs and see where I can bring value to this role. So I'm currently doing this. My background is what got me here. And I'm excited to bring these skills into helping in this role. Now, you don't have to. If this gets too wacky for you, just do past, present, future. I started my career in marketing. I'm now a career coach and I help companies in this way. Perfectly fine. But sometimes I find it helpful for folks to break it up a little bit and start with what you're currently doing so that you get that software developer thing in the top of their mind right at the beginning before jumping back into what you did before. Does anyone want to give it a try? Is this to answer the question, tell me about yourself? Renata, I know you were scared of this question, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
Great. I guess my biggest challenge here is that I'm not really sure what do I offer.
That's okay. Just give me what you have and we can add to it.
Okay.
What did you do
So-
before the boot camp, just to set it up?
So I used to work for a coffee company. I started there as an account manager and I kind of moved over 4 years and I ended up as a project manager while I was still doing my account manager job. And I trained new employees, handled my accounts. I managed the entire Canadian section because I'm fluent in French, and that's kind of how I got that job there. So yeah.
Cool. And what do you enjoy most about development so far?
About development, I really like debugging, problem solving, when something is broken and something's not working and just looking at it and trying to find it and that great feeling when I do and fix it. And I also do like web development, the front end, and making things look pretty.
Cool. So if we were to do your present, past, future, you could say, hey, my name is Renata. I'm a web developer and I really enjoy debugging websites, finding breaks in the website and making sure that everything is running smoothly. I got to this point through my background in project and account management, where I was constantly running teams, making sure things were flowing correctly and making sure projects were staying on task and on time. And I'm really excited to learn more about this role and see what types of things you're looking for help with from a software development and project management perspective.
Okay, can you write that down for me?
It's recorded, so you can go back and watch it. We are at, like an hour and 42 minutes in. So that's your mark point to jump back in. But yeah, so that's how we can kind of set this up in a real world example. I'm currently doing this. I got here with my background in project management, and I can bring those two things together to help your business. Cool. And the way we connect the dots between transitions is by, again, talking about what we learned. So I was working in marketing and I learned about behavioral psychology and how to get people to do things, basically manipulate people. And now what I learned from doing that is I prefer to reverse that and help individuals manipulate companies into giving them money rather than companies manipulating people to give them money. And so that's the fun transition that I've learned how to talk about after years of saying this. But for you, what is the thing you learned in your transition? So in my old job, I learned that I really enjoyed dealing with people, but I didn't enjoy I don't know, hours of being in the restaurant business. So I want to still be on a team helping manage people and helping do all these things, but from a more technical, office oriented perspective, something along those lines. I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, Kevin, but you can take it and run with it how you like. And how do we make it short? Here is the template. Merging a background in this role and that role, I help companies solve these problems and get these outcomes. So merging a background in project management and software development, I help companies debug their websites and improve the efficiency of their online presence, or improve their customer experience, or whatever, right? Does anyone else want to give this a shot? Ben, Jennifer, we haven't heard from you too.
I'll try, I guess.
Cool.
Merging my background in healthcare and sales, I can help companies communicate, or I can help communicate to companies how to solve their problems from an analytical approach in order to help them scale for growth for the future,
Cool.
while also using my technical background gained from working in
Nice.
healthcare.
So merging a background in sales and software development, you help companies. We want to get the software in there. You help companies prepare to scale for growth, or you help companies scale their business through implementation and, let's say, what is it when there's implementation and then there's actual usage of the technology, right? You have to get everyone to actually use it. So adoption. So implementation and adoption of technology. So because you have the communication skills of a salesperson and the technical skills of a software developer, you're able to help companies implement and improve adoption of new tech within the company. And maybe that doesn't work for every company, but this is a template that we can adjust to the job descriptions, to the conversations, to whatever is in front of us, right? So it's kind of a very high level approach to this.
Not to be nitpicky, but would you use that same description for data as you're using for software development?
How do you mean?
I'm just thinking, like, I don't know if I'd necessarily, like, if I would highlight the same things like of implementation and adoption if my goal is to be into data rather than software development.
Sure. So what do you enjoy about data?
I like taking complex ideas and simplifying them.
So same thing, merging a background in sales, software, and data analysis. I help make complex data easier for people to understand and implement in their business. So again, that communication skill, the data skill, bringing it together, making it easy for people to understand and use. So you can, of course, change that to your liking, but that'd be a quick way to think about it. All right, so we're going to take a few minutes here. Here's an example, merging a background in customer service and web development. I help companies create amazing experiences for their users across the web.
I have one I kind of just thought of on the spot if I could pitch it to you.
Yeah, we'll go to this slide. I actually never get to this slide because I always get people to say it beforehand. Yeah, pitch it. You muted yourself.
Sorry. Got it. Merging a background in the neurosciences and data science, I help companies make more informed decisions with their data and visualize it.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. That's exactly what we're going for. And of course, when you're in an interview, maybe you talk a little bit more about that stuff, give an example. When you're on your profile on LinkedIn, you keep it short. When you're doing a cover letter, you make it a paragraph. Like that's what we can do with this, right? This template is for us to adjust as needed. I just got it as simple. I got it down to one sentence, as simple as we possibly could, so that you can build from there. All right, everyone, we have a few minutes here. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to try and write this yourself. And I won't put you on the spot. Just copy paste what you have in the chat when you have it. Probably a run-on sentence, but YOLO. Merging a background in project management. Oh, it went away. In program management and software development, I apply creativity and critical thinking to help companies troubleshoot technical problems and create an interesting and interactive way for customers to enjoy their products. Awesome. See how much more specific that is than I help companies with problems? It's like it's just a little more specific, helps them know where the conversation is going. Merging a background in restaurant management and software development, I help companies build user-friendly interfaces to get the ultimate user experience. Cool. Merging a background in the office admin and data science, I help companies communicate among the team to get their projects done. Merging a background in technical neurosurgery with software engineering, I help companies solve back-end computing problems to provide more efficient product. Merging a background in sales, software, and data, I help communicate complex ideas for companies in order to help inform ideas and scale growth. These are really great starting points. So keep working on these, practice them out loud, download interview questions and try and say them out loud. It's going to be feeling very stilted. It's totally fine. They are stilted. It's literally a template. So get to a place where you can talk about it a little bit more simply. Like even when I introduced myself, it started with a template and then I realized I left out a word. So I made sure I brought it in later when I was rambling about something else. So it's okay. You don't have to be perfect in how you answer things. You just have to be building trust, building rapport, and, not freaking out. And if we've practiced answers for things and we know what stories we want to tell, it's much easier to keep ourselves from freaking out. These are really good starting points. And you can add this to your LinkedIn about, your resume summary. You can put this in your tell me about yourself answers in interviews and so on. It'll just adjust slightly for each space. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Feel free to unmute and we can talk about anything under the sun if there was something you wanted us to get to about the job search that we didn't.
Kind of have a question about, oh, my bad, Kevin, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have kind of a unique situation for myself. So, I was going through my background with you. I mentioned I went to college for biochemistry. Usually people ask after I say that, hey, why didn't you go into biochemistry? Which is kind of a tough question for me because after college, I kind of became a drug addict. I ended up homeless, living in a car for a while, ended up in jail. Got a few felonies under my name. After that, I kind of got my life together, kind of cleaned everything up. But how do I kind of handle that situation?
Yeah, there's a lot there. And I think it's going to vary depending on your comfort level and how much you want to reveal to people at different times. So sometimes
Like, how much should I reveal? Or is that just case by case, like reading the person?
I would read the person and the company. I've worked with people who've had felonies and that's kind of caused some issues in their job search, but then they found the company that was cool with it and they're good to go. I think it's more about how you talk about it and being very mindful about which parts you share and which parts you maybe save for a different time. Um, there is like background check stuff that you probably want to think about, and knowing like timelines for how far back things go and how much you want to reveal or not reveal. There's also the positive side of redemption stories. Like people really enjoy when someone's gone through a hard time and has come out the other side stronger and better. So there's a really good story in there too. It's not just, oh, I went through this period, right? Like it's part of the journey. So where do you feel your comfort level is at this time with that story? And maybe what I would, I want to get your opinions on that. And then the other thing I want to say is we want to test it out with networking conversations before getting to an interview. So we want to see how people in the field in different industries and stuff react so that you can be prepared for all the different reactions, not to get the right reaction, but just be ready for all the reactions. And then we can be more confident going into the interviews. But how comfortable are you with the story at this point?
I mean, it's been so long now. It's like ancient history in my head, so I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Cool. So it's really, it's really up to the type of story you want to tell. If you want to tell a story of like going through hard times and coming out stronger, then that's a perfectly good story to tell. It's totally true and honest. If you want to skip over it and just talk about your management experience and your interest in tech, totally cool too. Both of them are true stories. If they ask about it or if it comes up like in the background check, have a prepared story of how you like to talk about it. You know, it's kind of reminds me of when someone gets laid off and they don't want to talk about it. It's like, well, actually, no, I have a better example. I worked with someone who was a professional poker player for 4 years and he didn't want to talk about it in interviews at all. And I go, well, what's worse, being a mysterious person who didn't exist in the world for 4 years and didn't like have an answer to any questions and won't talk about it, or someone who, was a poker player, which actually helps with data science. And you meet that one person who has gone through the same thing and they really want to work with you because they love poker or something like that. Right. So it can be a strength. It can help us or hurt us depending on how we talk about it. So if you're confident about it and you're not bothered by it, other people won't be bothered by it. I know it's not a perfect answer, but if you want to chat more, like feel free to ping me and we can talk one-on-one about it.
This is kind of piggyback off of that. And in my humble opinion, Kevin, I think that if you were in a situation where you ended up revealing that to an employer and they didn't take you, it's probably not a job that you would want to work at anyway. At least like in my experience working with you and like how helpful you've been to me and like everybody else in the class and stuff, and like how open and just like fucking smart you are, to be honest. Like you're good. Like I think you're not going to have a hard time finding anything.
Yeah. And I think that's where networking comes into play so much. Because if you're talking to people, like you've just told us this, right? So we know it. So it's not going to be a surprise if it comes up later. Then recommending you for a job, it's perfectly fine. So everyone knows it. It's all above board. No one really cares. It's all good. So I think that's with the job search so much. And this is one of the things I'm trying to do with my podcast is like, so much seems bigger than it is. Like so much of what happens in the job search is in our head that it's not like no one's actually thinking half the things that we think they're thinking. So it's better to just say it and get the answer than to spend a month worrying about whether or not they are thinking a certain way. is typically what I tend to see. So, but again, if you have more questions or you want to go deeper, we can definitely talk. Anyone else have additional questions on pitching yourself, the job search, or anything else?
Yeah, I have another barrier to entry question. So I did not finish university. So that question gets brought up quite a bit. And the reasons are like, I have some really huge problems with the formalized education system and the valuation, and with the fact that degrees are used as a barrier to entry or a classism kind of thing. And I don't want to participate in that system. I also saw it as a giant waste of time and money when we have all that information available. For some reason, you need a piece of paper to prove that you know something.
Yep.
But that doesn't translate very well, or it's like, hey, this person couldn't hack it, this person doesn't get it, or it seems like there's an artificial valuation of university education, and I don't know how to explain that, or like, I left because of like morality reasons or stance issues or a worldview issue, not like, but that's not how it comes across. That's not what people interpret from this person left college. Oh, they dropped out because they couldn't do it.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure how to approach that conversation.
So the next thing I want to touch on actually addresses Kevin and your question, Blair, is when we tell the stories, it's all about where we put the focus, right? So if we put the focus on, what happened in the time that you were going through that, then that's what they're going to think about. But if we put the focus on how you got out of that situation, then that's what they're going to think about. So it's all about what we shine the light on. If you shine the light on the morality issues and your issues with the system, that is a very interesting conversation and could be had, but probably not in an interview. Because again, going back to the tone we're trying to set, right? If we answer a question, tell me about a time you had conflict with a coworker, and I start getting angry at the person that I used to work with, which I do, it shifts the tone of the interview. And now all of a sudden I was having a great interview. Now we're in a different emotional place. And now I'm flustered and I'm not going to answer the next question better. Or something that people bring up all the time is they're like, at the end of the interview, should I ask them for feedback on how well I did on the interview and what I could do better? I'm like, well, what if you had a great interview? And then the last thing you ask them is, what could I do better? And now they're thinking about all the negative things you did right before you finished the interview. You kind of blew the whole tone, right? So I would not recommend, this is not the time or place for that conversation, right? So it's what's more interesting to me, or the question, remember, there's always a question behind the question. Why didn't you go to university? You can answer that literally. Well, I didn't go because of these moral reasons. Or you can say, I didn't go to university because I was doing this instead. And then you shift the focus to what you were doing instead, and you talk about that. And it's less about the decision and the morality, and it's more about the things you did and what you learned from those experiences, if that makes sense. Does that help? Cool. All right. And I know we're over time. So I'll wrap it up, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me, Martin McGovern, on LinkedIn. I do a live stream every single morning about like just life and careers and all sorts of different stuff. So feel free to connect, ask me more questions. Always happy to do a quick 15-minute chat to follow up on anything we talked about here. And yeah, I've talked myself out. So thank you so much.
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's your favorite pie?
My favorite pie is French silk.
Oh shit! All right, we haven't had that one yet. Nice, solid answer.
Okay. But
Thanks.
thanks. Yeah, unfortunately, my girlfriend loves apple, and I mean I like it, but it's no French silk. Thanks for having me, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll catch you on the internets.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Can you say bye?
Bye. Good to see you.